Hello, my friends. Rob Roselli coming to you once again, not Fox News Network. Today being Thursday, March the 16th, 2017. Again, the website boxofsunglasses.com. Email info at boxofsunglasses.com. Twitter at Rob Roselli. Facebook Rob Roselli1. And just recently, President-elect Trump took a trip down to Nashville. And bothered to go to the Hermitage, okay, which is considered the home of President Andrew Jackson, okay, who was president, I believe he won in 1828, went out to 1836. Okay, that's a very significant move on Trump's part. Of course, the mimbos and bimbos on Fox News and the talking heads, so-called experts, missed the whole point of this trip. Okay, that is a very significant symbolic trip. Okay, it was hugely significant as to why he did that, and saluted the bust or whatever he did of Andrew Jackson. Okay, it wasn't just a rally for the people in Tennessee. I mean, I guess it was in a sense a kind of a populist rally going all the way back almost 200 years to when people in this country actually used to think and be educated before the United Nations, Dewey, Rockefeller, and their usual idiot underlings, the ones you see on the streets today, these college millennial imbeciles. Okay, the output of their criminal Rockefeller, Dewey, education establishment overlords, before they came into power in the early 1900s with evolution and that whole scam, when people used to think for themselves back almost 200 years ago in the days of Andrew Jackson. People knew what was going on. Okay, Americans, they had just fought the revolution. And just to give a background, brief background to the revolution, yeah, I mean, there was the Intolerable Acts, the Stamp Act, all this sort of thing, the rights. But really what the driving force behind the revolution was the fact that the England, okay, the home country, whatever you want to call it, forced the colonies off their own currency, okay, called colonial script, okay, and it was basically outlawed by the Bank of England, and they were forced to buy bonds, okay, from the Bank of England, and therefore support the Bank of England, and we of course know the rest of the history of that, and the colonists absolutely did not like that, okay, so then when it came to the Constitution, we had the Articles of Confederation, which were basically a very loose-knit association or United Nations, whatever you want to call it, of the colonies. That didn't last long, and they had the Constitution, and still many of the founders distrusted centralized power of the federal government, which explains the three separate branches of government and that whole thing. I don't know if they teach this stuff in civics anymore, but one of the biggest points of contention of the Constitutional Convention was the establishment of a central bank, okay, and Alexander Hamilton. It's somewhat disappointing, okay, because he was a war hero. I think he was an artillery commander in Washington's Revolutionary Army, one of the three writers, the main writers of the Constitution itself, but it seems he had a change of heart and was supportive of a private central bank, somewhat akin to the Federal Reserve System we have today. Of course, he was fought by Jefferson and some of the other anti-federalists, okay, but I'm no expert on American history. I'm just giving you the Cliff Notes version here, just to build a background of Trump's trip to Nashville in the home of former President Andrew Jackson. Now, the first central bank charter, I believe, was in 1792. It was a 20-year charter, went to 1812. And the colonists, okay, American colonies, did not want anything to do with a central bank, okay, and his charter was not renewed, and many historians, at least historians that I read, claim that the reason for the War of 1812 was because the charter of the United States Central Bank was not renewed, and it was a Rothschild-controlled institution, because that's how they control banks throughout the centuries, and in fact today. in the 21st century, okay, the Rothschild family, okay, who sit actually over the Rockefellers and the other so-called American billionaires and this sort of thing. But they were one of the main cogs behind the Federal Reserve System. We'll get to that in a minute. But basically, then the charter was renewed in 1816. Okay, a new central bank to issue, the issue currency. Okay, and control the United States currency. Now, Andrew Jackson comes along and says, well, I think his campaign slogan was Jackson and no bank. Okay, and he called them a den of vipers and thieves. Okay, which is right. This is a direct quote, by the way, out of Matthew chapter 3. Okay, John the Baptist calling the Pharisees the God's chosen people, generation of vipers and thieves. Okay, and telling them, how can you think not that you have Abraham as your father, because God can raise from these stones children of Abraham. Of course, stones representing the new temple of God, 1 Peter chapter 2. Okay, the Gentile non-believers. Just let me do a little sidebar here, okay, while I'm on the subject. I watched this John Hagee tonight, okay. I don't know if it's Trinity Broadcasting Network or whatever it was, and sitting there listening to this clown. Okay, this guy's a salesman. Okay, he's a slick salesman. I don't know how else to describe this guy, and I'm trying to be generous here, but sitting here talking about the Jewish people and Israel and God's chosen people coming back to the Holy Land in 1948, and just skipping over huge sections of Scripture. Okay, and we've gone over this before on several instances. Okay, remember the 3 principles of the show. Number 1 is the Bible's the infallible Word of God. That means the whole Bible, even the parts where people like John Hagee may not like in regards to the Jews and God's chosen people. I don't know how you skip around these chapters and very clear language. The kind we're talking about right now with Andrew Jackson quoting John the Baptist and calling the bankers a brood of den of vipers and thieves. Number 2 principle is, Israel is absolutely not God's chosen people. Okay, it's just a joke. All right, I don't know how else to say it. I mean, Jesus himself called them, children of the devil in John chapter 8, or again, Matthew 23, how do you escape being condemned to hell? And I don't know how much more clear it can be made. And of course, they made the covenant with Judas. If you go to, I believe it's in John 13, they covenanted with Judas, who was indwelled by Satan. They literally made a deal with Satan for Judas to turn in Jesus. And then they turned the whole crowd of Jerusalem against Jesus and had him crucified, even though Pontius Pilate wanted to release him. So I don't know how much clearer the New Testament, especially the Gospels, can be in this regard, but I guess the point is, stay away from con men like that, all right? And I'm not nearly as popular, and I don't have the multi-million-dollar, TV framework and superstructure behind me, obviously, and all this sort of thing, but if you're listening, if you're fortunate enough to come across this information, anyway, and the 3rd principle, of course, is there's no doubt, have no doubt, the United States is the mystery Babylon, described in Revelation 17 and 18. In my breakdown, posted on my site, boxofsunglasses.com, I believe the initiation of end times events are in motions as we speak. You're just not hearing about it on Fox News and things like, Trump's trip to Nashville, which we'll get back to in a second. But the impetus, what I believe is the forerunner to events, and not the stupid, ridiculous 7-year, Great Tribulation, all this nonsense. The tribulation's been going on since, Jesus back in, right before he was arrested and crucified. When he tells his followers, in the world you will have tribulation, but be cheerful, I have overcome the world. That's John chapter 16. So the Great Tribulation's been going on for 2,000 years, okay? You can't just sit here and try and, shoehorn it into some misinterpretation of the Scriptures and the book of Revelation and this sort of thing. People have been burned for as street lamps in the Roman Empire, and people that were tortured by the so-called, Christian Roman Church, people that were murdered for their beliefs throughout history. Okay, people that are being disemboweled, burned alive in countries all over the nation, all over the world. Excuse me, having their heads chopped off with machetes for their beliefs. I'd say they're suffering tribulation, and so for people in America to sit here and say, "Oh, we got to have the 7-year Great Tribulation," and that's then rapture and all this stupidity, really, I think is really disrespectful to all the sacrifices those people have made for the past 2,000 years and are making today, while we sit here in our nice cush lives in America and ponder it all. But that being said, okay, and we'll circle back into the conversation about Trump and Nashville and Andrew Jackson. The United States is the mystery Babylon, and the events of Revelation 17 and 18 and the destruction of Babylon, I believe, will initiate with a major economic collapse of the United States system. But let's face it, it's already collapsed. They're just papering it over. They're, whatever analogy you want to make, they're putting the EKG or whatever it's called, the adrenaline into the corpse, which is the United States economy, which is quantitative easing, which is a fancy name for German Weimar Republic style money printing. Okay, very simply going to monopoly board and handing out money to everybody. Okay, which causes inflation, and of course the government, when it counts, GDP growth of 1.9%, while factories, we're bleeding factories. There's 100 million people not in the workforce, and and this sort of thing, and then trying to tell us, the economy grew by 2%, year to year. Well, the reason it grew by 2% is because the inflation rate, they don't discount the inflation rate, which is a result of the fake money printing to begin with. So it gets so convoluted. So in other words, if you have a 5% inflation rate, and they say the economy grew by 1.9%, whatever ridiculous number, the BLS or whatever it is, whatever it's called, the BS, I don't know, Bureau of Labor Statistics, whoever, who knows, whatever nonsense clown show government agency comes up with these stupid numbers. When they say that the economy grew at 1.9%, saying inflation is really 5 to 8%, which it is, that means the economy actually contracted by 3.1%. Okay, so when Pharaoh Barry gets up there and his sycophant lapdog Pravda United States press gets up there and tries to say, "Oh, the economy grew at 1.9%." Well, how could that be? I mean, just think about it. Okay, with 100 million people not in the workforce, we're bleeding factories. Factory retail is in a major collapse. Sears is in trouble. Macy's is in trouble. Family Christian stores is just going to shut down their whole chain. Apparently, it's 250 or 300 stores or something like that. So, in the face of all this, we have 1.9% economic growth. It's a joke. Okay. So the economy, United States economy, is already a failed state. It's already in a state of depression. Okay. And of course, you don't see the breadlines. You saw the photos or the pictures from 1929, the depression. Because they're papering it over with food stamps and SNAP cards and EBT cards and printed money in the form of unemployment checks. And then, of course, you do have burgeoning tent cities all over the country and homeless shelters that can't meet demand and this sort of thing. Okay, but it's going to become all too when it hits the mainstream. I guess is what I'm saying. When it becomes so blatantly obvious that it can't be avoided anymore, and it collapse. Hits us like an avalanche. That's what sets off the events of Revelation 17 and 18. Okay, but I don't go for that tangent right now. And again, you can go on my site boxofsunglasses.com. You can look up the archives. And we went through 17 and 18 line by line on videos in the past, and you can read the summaries in there, or just read it. I know people don't have the attention span they once did. They don't like to read as much, but the line-by-line breakdown is presented on my website. But anyway, getting back to to kind of close that, little tangent there, but getting back to Trump. So basically, what Andrew Jackson did, is the way I understand it, is he withdrew all United States government funds from the central bank, essentially closing it down, okay? And he paid off whatever national debt we did have. He was able to pay it off, okay? And I'm just going to be honest here. I'm not exactly quite sure of the mechanics of how this all went down, okay? I just, in the context of what legal tender actually is, according to Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which says Congress shall coin and set the value of money, okay? Not some shady cabal of banks known as the Federal Reserve, some private organization that never gets audited, that essentially owns the United States. But be that as it may, okay, Andrew Jackson was the only president in United States history to actually pay off the national debt, pulled all the funds out, whatever funds, I guess, whatever debt we did have, to the international banksters, which namely the Rothschild, the Rockefellers, had not really gotten started at that time. Just paid it off and dissolved, basically essentially dissolving the bank, because apparently its lifeblood was United States government funds, which it took, and it's this whole fractional reserve lending scam, which is a whole other scam in and of itself, an inflationary scam, but I don't want to go off on that right now. But and there was an assassination attempt, okay, and the assassin was tied to the Rothschild family, okay. Guy fired, I think it was 2 pistols at him at point blank range, and both pistols misfired. Okay, so there were attempts on Jackson's life, which is a common theme, Abraham Lincoln, Garfield, okay, President Garfield, McKinley was another one, who was after J.P. Morgan, JFK, okay, was another one who was taking on the central bank, and, had his head blown off in broad daylight by the only bullet in history that contravened just about every known law of physics, of motion, okay, which is going to be Trump's ultimate fate, I think, or something like it, all right? They probably haven't assassinated him yet, because there's way too much multimedia, alternative news, keeping an eye on things that they haven't, I believe is the reason they haven't just offed him already. But that's not to say it's not going to happen, okay? But the point is, okay, you can see why Trump went down to Nashville to pay homage to Andrew Jackson, okay? Because it's just a real brief history, from 1836 to 1913, we had no real central bank. I mean, they were always there like piranhas and barnacles that they are, always kind of snapping at the periphery of this young country known as America, okay? But then, of course, according to multiple sources, they instituted by, expanding and contracting credit. The Rothschilds with their trillions, funding the Rockefellers and Morgans, Vanderbilt, Carnegie, and these kinds of people, by controlling, expanding, and contracting credit, they were able to really influence the economy in the absence of a central bank, okay? And of course, the Panic of 1907 got the ball rolling on the propaganda for the need for a central bank, okay, which they literally pulled off in the middle of the night, okay? They took off on a secret trip, and many people may have heard is Jekyll Island down there in Georgia. They got together, Rothschild interest, Rockefeller, Morgan, the rest of them. This Senator Aldrich, who is I think he's the father-in-law of David Rockefeller. I don't remember, Rockefeller, Aldrich, but anyway, this Senator Aldrich, okay, was kind of the ringleader within the Congress to get this Federal Reserve Act passed into law and signed by the sellout, okay, the racist Democrat, and I mean real racist, not this namby-pamby racist crap that passes off as racism today, okay, this nonsense on these stupid college campuses. But anyway, Woodrow Wilson, okay, who was in with the American eugenics crowd, okay, just sidebar, what's covered in here, the Un-American Genocidal Complex, okay, available on my site. Okay, it talks about the American eugenics crowd, and Woodrow Wilson was right in the middle of that whole Ivy League, white, Darwinist, blacks, and Indians, and Jews, okay, are bad, are subhuman, and need to be done away with. Blacks, in this country, of course, that manifested itself in something called the American Birth Control League, which we know today as Planned Parenthood. But anyway, just to come back off that tangent, so Woodrow Wilson signs this Federal Reserve Act into law, okay, and it becomes law. Literally, it was signed on, I think it was December 23rd, 1913, like literally, like most of Congress was away and taken off on Christmas vacation, and when they came back, they had the Federal Reserve, the central bank that Thomas Jefferson and the Anti-Federalists had fought so hard against, and Andrew Jackson had eliminated, in the century prior. Okay, that's a system we live under today. Okay, it's a system of perpetual debt that could mathematically never be paid off. Because once we borrowed $1 from it, it was mathematically over. Okay, once we borrowed $1 from it and didn't pay it back and shut it down right away, which should have happened in 1914. And by the way, the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, was kind of this sister law. Okay, the IRS was the enforcement arm of the Federal Reserve Bank. How's that make you feel? So not only do they screw us with inflation and printing funny money and diluting the dollars we do have, and then, which is a real cause of inflation, not demand. Okay, not that stupidity that that fifth grade level of economics that they might teach you, and if they teach it at all in schools today. But the real cause of inflation, price rising, is just endless money printing. But how about that? Not only did they screw us over and dilute the money we do have with inflation and endless money printing, the few dollars they diluted dollars we do keep, the IRS comes in and can pretty much take anybody's life and turn it into a living hell, created by the same central bankers, okay, in 1913. So this is the system we're under. This is a system that is about to implode. Okay, this is the system that has, if you think about it, okay, if you sit there and think about it for 2 seconds and clear your mind and stop listening to the jack-offs on Fox News, Fox Business News, and CNBC, and this Kramer and these other idiots, okay, these so-called economists, this Paul Krugman from the New York Times. If you just clear your mind and stop listening to these fools, it doesn't make any sense. How can the United States economy, how can we afford $14 trillion plus in wars? Okay, let's just take a snapshot over the last 15 years, the Bush, Clinton, Obama wars. How could we afford those wars, keep the military going, trillions of dollars in welfare payments, and at the same time, we don't really sell anything, maybe Caterpillar, maybe a few factories are left in this country. We can't make steel. They make the Freedom Tower, built to rebuild after that 9/11 scam. Remember the Saudi terrorists who somehow got tied to Saddam Hussein in Iraq and that whole 9/11 scam. But anyway, can't even build the Freedom Tower of the United States steel and glass. Most of it had to come from overseas. So the point is, we don't have any factories. We have the Rust Belt. We don't really produce cars anymore. We maybe assemble cars, but I don't know if many parts are really made in this country anymore. So we have no industry. We have a massive welfare state. We float how many tens of millions of illegal aliens for education and medical care, again, with the wars, and just the general waste, the education system, and just the billions and trillions that just gets lost, green energy, all the nonsense. So you have to ask yourself, how is this all possible? Just step back and think about it. Again, turn off the stupid idiots on TV and just think about it. The reason we're able to do this is because of the Federal Reserve System. Think about it. Without just endless money printing, okay, and in conjunction with, people, United States buying, cheap Chinese slave labor, plastic crap, and poison dog food and sending the United States dollars into China. Then China takes those dollars and, At least they did. None of them are doing it anymore. But, buying bonds that the government floats to support all its stupid programs that I just mentioned. Okay, and at the center of it all is the Federal Reserve System. Now, of course, nobody's buying our bonds, so they have this Zimbabwe Weimar Republic money printing scam, but they don't call it that. They don't call it a Weimar Republic Zimbabwe money printing scam. They call it quantitative easing. Okay, which basically means nobody's buying United States government's floating bonds, and the Federal Reserve just calls up the Treasury, has them print some money, or however it works, and then voila, the United States got, all of a sudden, it's pretty good work if you can get it. You just float a bond and then call up your banker and have him print up the money and just gives you the money, and voila, you got money to spend. That's a very broad brush, but it's a Cliff Notes version. That's basically what's happening when you clear away all the crap, all the technical jargon that's meant to confuse. That's really what's going on. So we're at DEFCON 4, whatever it's called. We're about to sink, and I don't know what Trump's going to do. Okay, and I'll say it again. On Trump, to me, represents the eye of the storm. I don't know. Is he a Christian? Is he not a Christian? Did he have his Paul the Apostle Damascus Road moment? I don't know. Okay, but be that as it may, the Trump effect he's having, in addition to eliciting the hatred and the stupidity and the insanity of the so-called, tolerant left, is on full display. Okay. But that all aside, him going and paying homage to the home of Andrew Jackson, to me, symbolizes he is ready to take on the Federal Reserve. Is he going to succeed? I'm going to say no, because behind the Federal Reserve, remember what the Federal Reserve really means. These are devil-worshipping occultists. Okay, here's your Federal Reserve note. Here's your capitalist pyramid of Giza right here in Mystery Babylon, Manhattan's Upper West Side. St. John's, the Divine Cathedral, financed by J.P. Morgan, who gave us this thing. Okay, this Egyptian pyramid with the all-seeing eye of Apollo, or Osiris, or Nimrod. Okay, or the horned god. Okay, the horned god. That sound familiar? Okay, Revelation 13, there's Satan, there's the beast Satan, okay, 7 heads and 10 horns, but then there's another beast with 2 horns who came up out of the earth. That's this Osiris or Apollo or Apollyon, Revelation 9. But this is what the bankers are worshiping, because remember, Satan promised the world to anybody that would bow down and worship him. Okay, so apparently, if you read Isaiah 14, he got the horned god and his crowd to worship him, as well as the Rothschild family, and they're paying homage to them all right here. That's really not the topic of tonight's show. That's a whole other discussion. But anyway, just the point is that this is where it all ties in. Okay, these are devil-worshipping, genocidal psychopaths running the world. Okay, they've literally stolen the wealth of the world, the United States especially, with the Federal Reserve System. They've just sucked it away like mooches, societal mooches, with their Federal Reserve System and the taxes that you pay, and just controlling the money supply means they basically control the country. I mean, I don't give 2 craps what these idiots on TV say. Now, Trump obviously is a little bit different. He's outside the establishment. Again, I'm not sure about this guy, but that's not really the purpose, to find out about Trump right now. But it's a very significant move. To me, it symbolizes now what's going to happen as he takes on the Federal Reserve central government, which is the real government. Okay, the Federal Reserve, again, it's tied in with what I call the un-American genocidal complex. When you talk about Rockefellers and Morgans, and then again, it's the Central Intelligence Agency, and they control the press. The useful idiot douchebags like Paul Krugman of the New York Times, who talk up, the Federal Reserve System like it's something great. Okay, Operation Gladio, Operation Northwoods, MK Ultra, all these CIA mind-controlled You know, all these acronyms that came out of World War II after the Nazis, the Anglo-American subgroup known as Hitler and the Nazis came out of World War II, and Operation Paperclip, you know, took all this data that these scientists had gathered. No, they didn't go to the Nuremberg trials. They were taken in, and they created things like NASA and the AIDS virus. Okay, and that's all covered in the Un-American Genocidal Complex. But anyway, the point is Trump is the president, the so-called most powerful man in the world, enough to take on really what is the Babylon, okay, all the way back to Nimrod. Let's just call it like it is, okay? If you know, I can sit here and cite, you know, spend hours just talking about the history here and what I know, is just barely scratches the surface. But let's just call it what it is, okay? It's Mystery Babylon and in Revelation 17, but it harkens back to the original Babylon of Nimrod. I mean, I just said Apollo, Osiris, and Nimrod are basically the same demonic entity. Okay, Nimrod was in control of the first Babel, the Tower of Babel, and our criminal, devil-worshipping Illuminati overlords have tapped into this same demonic stream, if you will, Satan / Lucifer and his sidekick, Apollo or Apollyon or Osiris or Nimrod, whatever you want to call them. And they worship these guys or these entities, and then they put them on a Federal Reserve note, and there you go. Okay? Is Trump, this president, the most powerful man in the world, so-called, you know, powerful enough to take on this? No. My money's on Rockefeller and Rothschild and Lucifer and Apollyon and not Trump. I mean, we must pray for Trump and pray for America, of course, but it's no match at the end of the day. Trump will continue to make waves. He will continue to upset people. He will continue to upset the Bush, Clinton, Obama, Rockefeller, Soros, Rothschild, whoever else, you know, demonic world power elite apple cart. But he will lose in the end, and when he does, this eye of the storm is going to close, and we're going to be right back in a major storm. I'm talking about true Christians. I mean, many Christians will give up their faith and, you know, throughout just whatever, but I feel sorry for those people. But anyway, so it's interesting times that we're living in, okay? That's just where we are right now, okay? So I'd say just keep a careful eye on Trump's, on his moves, and read between the lines is what he's saying, okay? Because he's at war with these guys, okay, with the so-called establishment, okay, who was expecting Queen Jezebel to be the president, or at worst Jeb Bush, that tomato can, that loser, that bag of excrement, Jeb Bush, okay, part of the Bush skull and bones family, descendants of, you know, the Nazi-supporting Bush / Harriman, Un-American Genocidal Complex Bush family. Okay, it was either Jeb Bush was the backup to Queen Jezebel. It wasn't supposed to be Trump. So it is a very interesting dynamic that's happening right now. But that's it. Okay. So there was a very significant move. So let's see what happens. But I'd say right now the most important thing is that this economy is not on the verge. It is collapsing. It's just being paper mache'd over, like I'd said. But the most important thing to get out of all this is God's Simple Salvation Plan on boxofsunglasses.com. Okay. And that's it. And then, of course, in conjunction with all this, we have pending war with North Korea, talking smack, Iran talking smack, China talking smack, Russia talking smack against the United States. It's all the chess pieces and the entities and everything is moving into place for a very, very dangerous and cataclysmic time ahead. It's just going to be complete mayhem. Okay, remember, another name for Osiris or Apollo, or the horned god, is Pan. okay, the green god, pandemonium, panic, order out of chaos, okay, the phoenix rising out of the ashes, you know, the symbol of Freemasonry. Okay, the ashes and the chaos, of course, symbolize us being burned, and then they rise from the ashes and with their god Lucifer and his sidekick Apollo or Osiris, who they call the unknown god. I don't want to go for a whole tangent on mythology right now, but anyway, the point is, again, God's Simple Salvation Plan, boxofsunglasses.com. Try and get back Tuesday, Thursday next week. Some nights I can't make it, but worst comes to worst, you can always go back to the archives that are listed at the top of my site, the old YouTube videos with summaries. Good night and God bless.